Dinner was silent. Unnaturally so. The kind of silence where every breath, every blink, every clink of metal against porcelain becomes deafening. My parents sat across the table, eating slowly, their expressions blank, like puppets going through the motions of being human. My sister was seated beside me. Her posture was tense, her gaze fixed on her untouched plate. She had not spoken a single word since we sat down. Then, beneath the table, her hand moved. She quietly slid a small folded note across the surface toward me. Her fingers trembled as she let go. I glanced at her, but she avoided my eyes. I picked up the note, unfolded it discreetly, and read the single word written in shaky handwriting: "Run." My chest tightened. I looked at my parents again. They remained perfectly still. And my sister, she was now slowly shaking her head, her eyes pleading with me. Something was deeply wrong. 4 days before the note, the world still made sense. The sky was overcast that morning, painted with heavy clouds that hung low but never burst. It was the kind of day that made everything feel quieter. Our home stood at the edge of a wooded area, surrounded by tall trees that always rustled, even when the wind was still. It had always been that way, and I never thought to question it. My sister, Lila, had always been the brighter half of us. Where I was quiet and cautious, she was bold, curious, and full of mischief. We spent most afternoons together after school, lying on the old brown rug in our living room, playing cards, or watching old VHS tapes that our parents had kept from their own childhood. It was ordinary, familiar, safe. But that Monday, something was different. When I walked into the house after school, I found Lila sitting at the kitchen table, her hands clasped in front of her, eyes locked on the window. She did not acknowledge me immediately, which was strange. Lila always greeted me first, usually with a sarcastic remark or a joke at my expense. "Lila," I said. She flinched slightly and turned her head toward me, forcing a smile. "Hey, you are back." Something in her tone was off. She sounded rehearsed. I dropped my bag and joined her at the table. "You all right?" She nodded quickly. "Yeah, just tired." Her fingers tapped lightly against the wood. Her eyes flicked to the hallway, then back to me. That was the first sign. Small, forgettable even, but looking back, it was not nothing. It was the first crack in a wall I did not know existed. Later that night, during dinner, she hardly touched her food. My parents did not comment. Usually, if either of us picked at our plate, one of them would say something, ask if we were feeling well, or if we needed something different to eat. But that night, they simply kept eating. Quietly. Efficiently. Mechanically. After dinner, Lila disappeared into her room without a word. I stood outside her door for a few minutes, unsure if I should knock. Eventually, I did, but she did not answer. The next morning, she was already downstairs when I woke up, sitting on the living room floor with her legs crossed, staring at the television screen, which was turned off. When I asked if she was okay, she just said, "It is fine," and got up to leave the room. I convinced myself she was just dealing with something, school stress, maybe, or a fight with a friend she had not told me about. But the strange things did not stop. By Wednesday, she was barely speaking at all. She kept her distance, moved quietly, and avoided being alone with our parents. She would walk behind them instead of beside them, and she always glanced at the corners of the room as if she were looking for something hidden, something I could not see. That night, I found her standing outside my room in the dark. I woke to a faint creak. At first, I thought I had imagined it, but when I opened my eyes, I saw a shape just beyond the doorway. I turned on the lamp, and there she was, Lila, in her oversized hoodie, barefoot, staring at me. I sat up, startled. "Lila, what are you doing?" She blinked slowly. "Can I sleep in here?" "Yeah, sure. What is wrong?" She walked to the bed without answering and climbed in beside me. Her body was cold, and she curled up tightly, like she had not been warm in days. I waited for her to say something, but she did not. Not then. I woke up later that night to the sound of her whispering. At first, I thought she was talking in her sleep, but as I listened, I realized she was repeating the same words over and over under her breath. "They are not them. They are not them. They are not them." I reached out and touched her shoulder. She stopped whispering immediately and turned her back to me. The next morning, she acted like it had never happened. I began to notice other things, too. The front door was always locked now. My parents had never been overly cautious, but now they insisted every window remained shut, even when the house was stifling. The basement door was taped shut, with duct tape running in an X across the wood. When I asked why, my mother just smiled and said, "We are reorganizing down there. Do not worry about it." Reorganizing? We had lived in that house for over 10 years. Nothing had ever been reorganized before. Lila watched me closely every time I talked to our parents. If I laughed at something they said, her face would harden. If I said something harmless, she would go quiet. It was as if she was silently begging me to stop trusting them. By Thursday afternoon, the sense of unease had fully settled into my chest. It was not just her behavior, it was everything. The air in the house felt heavy. The lights seemed dimmer. Even the mirrors felt strange, like they were showing me something slightly different from what I expected. That evening, I went into Lila's room. She was sitting at her desk, drawing. "What is that?" I asked. She looked down at the page, then slowly turned it around. It was a sketch of our family. Her, me, our mother, and father, sitting at the dinner table. But in the drawing, the figures of our parents had no faces. Just smooth, blank skin where their features should be. And underneath the drawing, in shaky letters, she had written, "Do not believe what you see." I stared at the page, then at her. She looked up at me with tired eyes and said, "Please pay attention. They are not who they say they are." The drawing stayed with me. Even after I left Lila's room, I could still see those faceless shapes around the table, frozen mid-meal, their skin smooth and featureless. The words beneath it, "Do not believe what you see," echoed in my mind long into the night. I wanted to convince myself it was just a drawing. Just art. A product of anxiety or stress. But something deeper in me knew better. I stayed up late that night, lying in bed with the lights off, listening. The house had always made noise, pipes groaning, wind against the windows, the refrigerator humming softly in the kitchen. But now every sound felt sharper, closer, more deliberate. Around 2 a.m., I heard soft creaks outside my bedroom door, like weight being slowly shifted across the floorboards. I held my breath, staring at the ceiling, too afraid to move. The sound stopped outside my door. Then silence. I waited. Minutes passed. Eventually, I slid out of bed, opened the door quietly, and peeked into the hallway. No one was there. The next morning, I tried to confront Lila. She was sitting at the kitchen counter, eating dry cereal with a blank stare, her fingers absently tapping the side of the bowl. "Why did you draw that?" I asked, leaning close so our parents would not hear. She looked at me, then down at the table. "Because it's true." "They are our parents," I whispered. "What are you saying?" She leaned in and said, very softly, "They are not. They only look like them. But they are not." I stared at her. "How long have you known?" "A while," she replied. "But they are getting better at pretending." Before I could respond, our mother walked into the room. Her smile was wide, too wide. "Good morning," she said cheerfully. "Sleep well." Lila did not answer. I mumbled something and sat down across from her, heart thudding in my chest. I studied my mother's face, same dark hair, same soft voice, but I noticed something now. Her eyes blinked just a little too slowly. Her smile lingered longer than it should have. She stood too still, like she was waiting for something. I began to test her. At breakfast, I asked questions, specific ones only my real mother would know the answer to. "Hey Mom, remember when I broke my arm? What hospital did we go to?" She paused for a second. Just a second. Then smiled again. "St. Mary's, sweetie. Of course." It was the right answer, but it had taken her just a little too long to say it. Later that day, I searched the house. Nothing dramatic, nothing too obvious. I did not want to be noticed. I checked drawers, closets, even behind picture frames. Everything looked normal. Too normal. That was the problem. The house had always been messy. Real. But now everything was too clean, too organized. Like someone had staged it. In the back of the hallway closet, I found a box that used to contain old board games. I opened it. Inside were papers, family photos, school drawings, report cards, everything that proved our lives had happened as we remembered. But none of it looked recent. The most recent photo was from 2 years ago. Nothing newer. Where were the new pictures? Where were the memories from this year? That night, I checked the basement door again. The duct tape was still there, still in a perfect X. I pressed my ear to the door and listened. Faint, rhythmic sounds came from below. A soft scrape. Then silence. I went to bed shaken. At 3 a.m, I woke up to find my window open. The cold wind chilled my skin. I was certain I had locked it before going to sleep. As I got up to shut it, I noticed something on the windowsill. A small, folded square of paper. I opened it. It was Lila's handwriting. They know you're starting to see. Be careful what you show. My heart jumped. I turned to look out the window, and for a brief second, I thought I saw someone standing near the trees, tall, motionless, just barely visible between the trunks. But when I blinked, they were gone. The next day at school, Lila was called to the office during third period. When she returned, she would not talk. Her face was pale, her lips pressed into a firm line. What happened? I asked. They asked me questions, she whispered. About you. About what I told you. Who did? She hesitated. The counselor. But it wasn't her. I did not understand. What do you mean? She looked like her. Spoke like her. But her eyes were wrong. Her voice cracked on that last word. She was terrified. That evening, I overheard our parents talking in the kitchen. I had gone to get a glass of water when I stopped at the corner and heard my mother's voice. He is not ready, she said. He will be soon, my father replied. There was a pause. Then, if he becomes a problem, we will do what we did with the other one. My hand shook. I backed away, went upstairs, and locked my door. Lila knocked 10 minutes later. I need to show you something, she said. We went into her room. She pulled up the floorboard beneath her bed and took out a small box. Inside were a few items, a pocket flashlight, a journal, and a crumpled photograph. The photograph was of our family, standing in the living room. It looked normal at first glance, but in the background, barely visible, was a shadowy figure standing behind the couch. No face, no features, just a dark shape, watching. I did not notice it until I looked closer, Lila said. But it's always there. In every photo I took this year. She showed me more. Each one had the figure somewhere, behind the door, near the staircase, in a window reflection. They are not just pretending, she whispered. They are watching everything. I stared at her, my mind spinning. What do we do? She looked at me, and for the first time in days, her eyes were steady. We plan, she said. Because I think dinner tomorrow is not really dinner. The night after Lila showed me the photographs, I could not sleep. Every shadow seemed to move. Every sound felt louder. I kept thinking about that figure in the background, the one standing behind the couch, the one I had never noticed until she pointed it out. How many times had I walked past it? How often had I been watched without realizing? At 2:07 a.m., I left my room with a flashlight in hand and tiptoed down the hallway. I did not know exactly what I was looking for, but I had the growing sense that the answers were somewhere inside the house, and that they were no longer hiding. Lila's door was shut. I paused outside it, listening. No sound. I did not want to wake her. I moved on. The air on the staircase felt cold, heavier than before. Every step creaked under my weight, though I tried to move slowly. I made my way to the basement door. The duct tape was still there, perfectly sealed in an X, just as it had been for the past week. I reached for the handle. Locked. I crouched down, pressed my ear against the wood again. This time, I heard breathing. Not mine. Not Lila's. Deep, deliberate, controlled breathing from the other side. I stood up, heart pounding, and backed away slowly. In the morning, the tape was gone. I asked my mother about it while she poured tea. Was the basement open last night? She smiled at me without blinking. Of course. It always is. Why do you ask? That was a lie. Lila noticed it too. When I told her, she nodded without hesitation. They are slipping, she said. They are forgetting what lies they have already told. We spent the rest of the afternoon combing through the house. Every drawer, every cabinet, every closet. Most of it seemed normal, but the deeper we went, the more we uncovered. Behind the wardrobe in the guest room, we found a series of small holes drilled into the wall. When I looked through one, I realized it gave a direct view into my bedroom. Another hole pointed into Lila's. They had been watching us. In the attic, buried beneath dusty boxes, we found 2 suitcases. Both had our names on them. Each contained a change of clothes, a toothbrush, a water bottle, and a small envelope. Mine had a note inside that simply read, "For transport. 3 days. Do not damage." Lila's had the same, except hers was marked, "Stabilized. Cleared for hold." We stared at each other, both trying to process what it meant. "This is not just pretending," Lila said softly. "They are planning something." That evening, the hallway lights began to flicker. Our father said it was a wiring issue and told us not to worry. But I remembered what Lila said. They were slipping. They were forgetting the details. When lies were stacked too high, they began to fall under their own weight. At dinner, our parents acted more cheerful than usual. They asked more questions. They smiled more. It felt forced, like a bad imitation of a perfect life. I watched my father's hands as he picked up his glass. They did not shake. They did not shift. They just hovered perfectly steady, unnaturally steady, before setting it back down. After dinner, Lila handed me another note. "Tonight, we find out what is downstairs." We waited until the house fell silent. At midnight, we met by the basement door. She had a hairpin. It took her nearly 10 minutes, but eventually, the lock gave way with a soft click. The door opened. The smell hit us first. Damp, metallic, and something else, something sour, like spoiled meat. I fought the urge to gag as we stepped inside. The basement was colder than I remembered. The stairs groaned under our weight, and our flashlights cast long, eerie shadows against the concrete walls. Boxes lined the walls, but they were not filled with decorations or tools. They were filled with files. Hundreds of them. We opened the first one. Inside were photos of us. Candid shots, taken through windows and doors. Notes were scribbled in red ink beside each photo. Subject responsive to environmental change. Maintains emotional memory. Observe further. Another file held documents with strange labels. Host compatibility. 81 mirror data stable identity bleed. Lo, what is this? I whispered, feeling cold sweat run down my back. Lila picked up a small black device from one of the boxes. It looked like a remote. She pressed a button. A section of the basement wall slid open. Behind it was a second room, small, windowless, and glowing with faint blue lights. The hum of electricity filled the air. At the center stood a tall cylindrical chamber made of glass, filled with a murky, greenish fluid. Floating inside was my mother, or someone who looked exactly like her. Unmoving. Eyes closed. Tubes connected to her back, her arms, her chest. Lila grabbed my arm. "I told you," she whispered. "That is not her upstairs." I wanted to run, to scream, to wake up. But I stood frozen, staring at the impossible sight in front of me. Next to the chamber was a monitor, showing brainwave patterns and digital vitals. A name blinked at the top of the screen. Sarah W. Host file locked. I turned to Lila. "What are they?" She shook her head slowly. "I do not know. But I think they are using us. Watching. Replacing." We backed out of the room and resealed the wall, then replaced the lock on the door. No one could know we had been there. As we crept back up the stairs, I paused at the top step. Footsteps. Slow. Measured. Coming from the kitchen. We ducked into the hallway as our father appeared at the far end. He stood there silently, his eyes scanning the room like a machine processing data. Then he turned and walked back into the dark. Back in our rooms, we whispered through the wall. "We need to leave," I said. "Tonight. They will notice. They already know something is wrong." There was a long pause. Then Lila said quietly, "Tomorrow night. During dinner. I will give you the signal." I hesitated. "What signal?" She paused again. "You will know." And then she said something that made my blood go cold. "They did this to the others. The ones before us." I sat in silence for a long time after that, staring at the ceiling, trying to understand what others she was talking about. But deep down, I already knew. Here is the next section of your story. Friday evening arrived, and with it, a storm. The sky had darkened early, long before sunset, casting our home in a cold, grey light. Wind rushed against the walls, making the windows tremble. Inside, everything was too calm. Dinner was ready at exactly 6 o'clock. Our parents called us down in voices that felt smooth, pleasant, and deeply wrong. There was no edge to their tone, no warmth either. It was practiced, empty. The same way someone might greet strangers at a store. Lila and I walked down together, side by side, neither of us speaking. Her hand brushed against mine as we reached the bottom of the stairs. That tiny contact meant everything. We were in this together. The dining table was already set. 4 plates. 4 glasses. 4 pairs of utensils lined up perfectly, with everything centered just right, as if someone had measured it all. The food looked good. Too good. A perfectly browned roast, colorful vegetables, fresh bread, and gleaming silverware. It looked like it belonged in a magazine. And that alone made it terrifying. Our parents were already seated when we entered. "Come," our mother said, smiling. "Sit. It is still warm." We took our seats slowly. Lila sat beside me again, just as she had the first night. Her expression was blank, but her foot tapped lightly beneath the table, a rhythm I recognized. It was how she had calmed herself as a child, when she was scared of the dark or when thunderstorms shook the windows. I glanced at her. She did not look back. The air felt still, tense. The only sound came from the clinking of silverware and the quiet tapping of Lila's foot. Then, our father raised his glass. "To family," he said. We raised ours too, because not doing so would have been noticed. I let the rim touch my lips but did not drink. They began to eat. It was surreal, watching them chew, smile, swallow, repeat. Their motions were so perfectly synchronized that it made my stomach turn. No conversation. No glances exchanged. Just a mechanical performance of what dinner was supposed to look like. I leaned slightly toward Lila. "Are you ready?" I whispered. She nodded. Barely. The room felt like it was holding its breath. Halfway through the meal, she reached under the table. Her fingers found mine and squeezed once. Then, slowly, she slid her hand to the table surface and placed a small folded paper beside my plate. She did not look at me. She kept eating, chewing, swallowing. I unfolded the note in my lap, hidden from view. "Run." My pulse thundered. I looked up. Our parents were still eating, but something had changed. Their chewing had stopped being natural. They were no longer reacting to the food. They were just moving their jaws, mimicking the act of eating. Their eyes were fixed forward, staring blankly at the far wall. That was the signal. Lila stood first. The moment she did, their heads turned sharply toward her. "Where are you going, sweetheart?" my mother asked. Her voice was calm. Too calm. "I am not feeling well," Lila said. "You should sit," our father added. "Dinner is not finished." I stood too. Their heads turned toward me, jerky, robotic. Their faces still smiling. "You too," my mother said, tilting her head slightly. "You are not excused." "I need to use the bathroom," I replied. "You can go after dinner," she said. "Please sit down." Lila stepped away from the table. Our father rose. He did not speak. He simply walked around the table toward her. I grabbed Lila's arm. "Now," I whispered. We ran. The kitchen chairs crashed behind us. Something broke. We sprinted down the hallway as the lights began to flicker. Behind us, footsteps followed, steady, fast, far too smooth to be human. We turned the corner, heading for the front door. It was locked. Lila fumbled with the chain. I turned just in time to see our mother appear at the end of the hall, her head tilting as she took one perfect step after another. "Do not go," she said gently. "This is your home." Lila yanked the door open. Cold wind and rain burst inside. We ran into the storm. Our feet hit the muddy ground as we sprinted through the front yard, past the gate, and into the trees beyond. Thunder cracked above us. The sky lit up in flashes of white and blue. We did not look back, not until we reached the edge of the woods. Then we paused. Behind us, our parents stood just outside the doorway. Still, watching. Their silhouettes framed by the warm yellow light inside the house. They did not chase us. They simply stood there, as if they knew something we did not. We kept running. Eventually, we reached the old tool shed deep in the woods, one that our grandfather had built years ago. It was dry inside, just large enough for the two of us to hide. We sat on the floor, soaked and shivering, our hearts still racing. What now? I asked. Lila pulled her legs up to her chest and rested her chin on her knees. They are not going to follow us, she said. I frowned. Why not? Because they do not need to. Lightning flashed again, illuminating the narrow shed. I looked at her. What does that mean? She turned to face me, her expression unreadable. They already did this. To others. Before us. The storm outside grew louder, the rain pounding on the tin roof like a warning drum. I felt cold seep through my clothes, through my skin, through my bones, and in that moment, I realized we had not escaped anything. Not yet. Not really. The shed was quiet except for the sound of rain hammering the tin roof. The storm had swallowed everything. Trees moaned beneath the wind's weight, and the sky flickered with angry bursts of lightning. Inside the wooden shelter, Lila and I sat on the floor, soaked to the skin, our backs against the wall, shivering from more than just the cold. She stared into the darkness, not speaking. Her knees were drawn to her chest, her arms wrapped tightly around them. I wanted to ask her what she meant, about the others before us, but I was too afraid of the answer. We cannot stay here all night, I whispered, barely audible over the storm. Lila nodded, slowly. I know. Then what do we do? She paused, then said, we go back. I froze. What? No. We need proof. If we run without it, no one will believe us. If we show them what we saw, what is in the basement, someone will have to listen. You want to go back to that house? Her eyes met mine. I do not want to. But we have to. For a long time, neither of us moved. Then we stood. The rain had softened the ground, turning the path into thick, sucking mud. Each step felt heavier than the last. Our clothes clung to us like weights. And yet, we kept going, closer to the house that no longer felt like home. From the edge of the trees, the house looked different. No lights. No movement. No sound. It stood like a husk, dead, empty, waiting. We approached slowly, keeping low, our feet barely making a sound as we moved across the soaked grass. Lila led the way around the side of the house, where the storm had knocked loose part of the fence. We slipped through and approached the back door. It was unlocked. I held my breath as Lila pushed it open. The kitchen was dark. Chairs were still tipped over from our escape. A glass lay shattered on the tile floor. Everything else was untouched, unmoved, still. We crept forward, careful not to step on the broken shards. I could hear my own heartbeat, loud, unsteady, and too fast. Past the kitchen, down the hallway, toward the basement. Lila stopped in front of the door. No tape. Just the handle. She turned to me. Ready? I nodded. She opened it. The smell had not changed. Damp, metallic, something rotting beneath the surface. We moved slowly down the stairs, flashlights shaking in our hands. The basement looked the same as before. The files. The boxes. The machines humming quietly in the dark. Lila walked directly to the panel in the back corner. This is it, she said. We record everything. She pulled out her phone and began filming. I watched the wall slide open again, revealing the hidden chamber. The green light filled the space like before. The glass tube stood tall and still. Inside floated the version of our mother, eyes closed, unmoving, as though she were dreaming. Lila whispered, "Get closer. They need to see." I raised my phone and stepped forward. That was when the monitor beeped. We both froze. The machine beside the tube lit up. Heart rate, temperature, brain activity. Something was waking. "She is responding," Lila said under her breath. The chamber hissed. Tiny bubbles swirled inside the liquid. Then her eyes opened. Not fast. Not wide. Just a slow, steady blink. She stared directly at me. I stumbled back, grabbing Lila's arm. "We have to go. Now." The machine let out a second beep, louder, sharper. A red light blinked. "They know," I said. "They know we are here." We turned and ran. Footsteps sounded above us, heavy and fast, not bothering to be quiet now. The front door slammed. Then another. And another. We were not alone. We reached the stairs, but as we climbed, the lights above us went out. "Lila, run!" I shouted. We pushed through the basement door and slammed it shut behind us, locking it quickly. But we knew it would not hold for long. We sprinted through the hallway, past the overturned chairs, the still warm plates, the glasses on the table. Everything looked frozen in time, as if dinner had ended only seconds ago. As we reached the front door, it swung open. Our father stood there, but he did not look the same. His smile was gone. His face was blank. His eyes, empty. "You should not have gone down there," he said. "That was not for you." Behind him, our mother appeared, her dress still spotless, her hair untouched by the storm. "We gave you everything," she said. "You had safety, comfort. You were watched, protected." "We never asked to be watched," Lila said. They stepped forward in perfect unison. Lila pulled me toward the stairs. Up. We ran again, this time up to the second floor. Our rooms. We locked ourselves in mine. "We need another exit," I said, panting. The window. Lila was already pulling it open. Wind and rain rushed inside. Below, the sloped roof of the porch gave us a small landing. From there, we could jump to the grass. "It is not that far," she said. She climbed out first, gripping the edge of the frame, then dropped to the porch roof. I followed. Our parents were downstairs now. Their voices echoed through the house, not shouting, but calm. Controlled. Convincing. "You are confused," our mother called. "You are tired. You are making this harder than it needs to be." Lila reached the edge and jumped. I followed her. The ground came fast. I landed hard, pain shooting through my ankle. But I stood. We ran. No one followed. Not immediately. We did not look back until we reached the tree line. The house stood still behind us. Dark. Lifeless. As if nothing had ever happened there. Here is the next section of your story. We ran until our lungs burned. The trees swallowed us whole, their branches clawing at our arms and legs as we crashed through the underbrush. The wind howled above, shaking the forest like an angry warning. Rain had softened the ground, turning every step into a struggle. But we kept going, faster, deeper, until we could no longer see the house through the trees. Only then did we stop. Lila collapsed to her knees, gasping for breath, mud streaked across her jeans and face. I sank beside her, my body trembling from the cold, from fear, from everything we had just seen. For several minutes, we said nothing. Then she looked at me. "They are not going to stop." I nodded. "I know." We both understood it now. This was not just about imitation or surveillance. This was control. Reprogramming. Replacement. Whatever was happening inside the house, it had started long before we noticed. And we were not the first. "What did you mean," I asked, "when you said they did this before? To others?" Lila hesitated. She pulled something from the inside of her jacket, an old photograph. It was faded and stained, the corners soft from being handled too many times. In the photo, 4 people stood in front of our house. A boy and a girl, slightly older than us, stood between 2 adults. The children looked just like us. Identical. I stared at it, my heart skipping a beat. "Who are they?" Lila looked down. "I do not know their names. I found the photo in the attic 3 weeks ago, tucked inside an old book. It was hidden under insulation." She turned the photo over. On the back, written in black ink, Batch 4, initial merge incomplete. Discarded. I stared at her, stunned. "Batch." "They have done this before," she whispered. "Maybe not to us directly, but to people like us. Clones, simulations, replacements. I do not know what to call them. But we were not the beginning." I looked at the photo again. The boy's eyes looked empty, just like ours had when we had sat at that dinner table, pretending everything was fine. "Do you think we are?" I stopped myself. But Lila finished the thought anyway. "Not real." The words lingered. The possibility hung in the air, heavier than the storm still raging above. "No," I said finally. "We are real." We feel. We remember. We ran. She nodded slowly, though uncertainty still clouded her expression. I folded the photo and placed it in my pocket. What if that is what they want? For us to doubt ourselves? I already do, she admitted. We sat in silence again, the trees swaying above us. Then a light flickered in the distance. Not from the house, but from the road. Headlights. A car. We stumbled toward it, breaking through the trees onto the narrow gravel road that led to the main highway. A single sedan was parked on the shoulder, engine running, lights on. A man stood beside it, speaking into a phone. He turned as we approached. He wore a dark jacket and had a badge clipped to his belt. He lowered the phone and stepped forward cautiously. "Hey, are you two all right?" Lila looked at me. I looked back. We were soaked, bruised, barefoot, and shaking. "We need help," I said. The man nodded slowly. "You're the kids from the residence on Ridge Hollow, right?" "Yes," Lila said carefully. "We got a call," he replied. "Something about a disturbance. From you." "No," I said. "We ran. We didn't have a phone." The man frowned. The call came from that address. Said the children were missing. Possibly unstable. I stepped back. Lila grabbed my hand. "Do not trust him," she said softly. The man noticed our reaction. "Hey, I just want to help. Can you get in the car? I'll take you to the station." I looked at his badge. It was clean. Too clean. The lamination looked new, untouched, perfect. His voice was steady. His smile too practiced. Behind him, in the back seat of the car, a silhouette moved. A woman sat there, watching. She looked like our mother. I stepped back again. Lila whispered, "They sent them." I turned and ran. Lila followed without hesitation. Behind us, the man shouted something, but I did not hear it clearly. My ears were ringing with panic. We ran back into the woods. Branches tore at us again. My legs ached, my side burned. But we kept going, following no path, just putting distance between us and the car. After what felt like hours, we stopped near an old hunting shack we had once explored as children. It was abandoned, but dry. We crawled inside and collapsed. Lila leaned her head against the wall. Her breathing was uneven. "What do we do now?" I asked. She looked at me, eyes wide and afraid. "We have to find someone who is not part of this. Someone real." But how do we know who that is? We don't. We slept in shifts that night, one of us always awake, listening. The next morning, we made our way to a small gas station 5 miles down the highway. The clerk behind the counter was an older woman with tired eyes and weathered skin. She looked real. She looked human. We bought water and snacks with crumpled bills from Lila's pocket. The woman did not ask many questions, but she noticed the mud, the cuts, the fear. "Are you two all right?" she asked gently. I paused, then said, "We ran away." She nodded slowly, then leaned in and whispered, "Good. Sometimes that's the only way." Her words stayed with me. We called the only person we trusted, Ms. Carter, our old neighbor who had moved away 2 years ago. She picked us up in less than an hour. No questions. No judgment. We stayed with her for days. And then, one morning, Lila was gone. Her bed was untouched. Her shoes still by the door. Her jacket still on the hook. Only one thing was missing, the photo. And in its place, on her pillow, was a note in familiar handwriting. "You were never supposed to remember." I searched the house first. Every room. Every closet. Every corner. I called her name again and again until my voice gave out, but Lila was gone. No sign of struggle. No broken windows. No footprints. No doors left open. She had simply vanished, as if she had been carefully lifted from this world without a sound. Ms. Carter called the police. They came and asked questions. I answered them, but I could see it in their faces. None of them believed me. A girl disappears. Her brother tells a story about copies and notes and basements. They nodded politely, wrote things down, and said they would investigate. But I knew they would not. Not really. I tried to go back. To the house. But when I arrived at the property on Ridge Hollow, it was gone. No house. No fence. No shed. Just trees. Wild, untamed trees where the clearing had once been. I stood in that place for hours. Not a single sign remained. No foundation. No rubble. Nothing. As though the house had never existed. As though we had never existed. I walked the perimeter 3 times before giving up. I returned to Miss Carter's and sat in silence for days. I did not eat. I barely slept. And then I found the second note. It was tucked into the sleeve of the sweatshirt Lila had left behind. A simple piece of paper, folded twice. Her handwriting was small but clear. If they come for me, do not follow. They will tell you lies. They will wear my face. They will sound like me. But I will be gone. And I need you to survive. So you can remember. I cried that night, more than I ever had in my life. Not just for losing her, but for the part of myself that vanished with her. Weeks passed. Then months. No one ever found her. No one ever found the house. And no one ever believed my story. But I remember. I remember the dinners. The silence. The shaking hands. The note that said run. The figure in the photos. The mother floating in the tank. The clone that watched us eat. The cold, unblinking eyes of something pretending to care. I remember it all. And now, I wait. I wait and watch. Because every now and then, I see her. Lila. Not the real one. Not anymore. She appears on the street sometimes. At school. In stores. Across the parking lot. Her face unchanged, her clothes perfect, her smile frozen. She sees me. But she never speaks. And when I blink, she is gone again. Like a reminder. Like a warning. Like a promise. So I write. I document everything. I tell this story not because I expect to be believed, but because someone, somewhere, might see what I saw. Might feel what I felt. Might be next. And maybe, when they do, they will run.